You might remember this retaining wall we built last year. That side of the pond was all about holding the road and driveway back, but this year we are tackling the other side of the pond edge. And this time, the goal is different. We need a reinforced edge that is strong enough for the tractor mower, but still almost disappears into the landscape. So let's get to work. The first job is removing this temporary electric fence. This fence has been here since winter, after an otter started getting into the pond and going after the fish. It did its job, but now it is sitting exactly where we need to work. Next, we mark the pile positions as close to the pond edge as we can. We are spacing them every 1.5 meters. Keeping the spacing this close helps us follow the curve better and makes the whole railing line stiffer and more stable later on. With the pile layout marked and checked, we can start drilling. Because these holes are starting on the slope, not on flat ground, the drill wants to slide down the edge. So at the start, we tilt the drill slightly uphill to hold the point in place. Once the auger bites into the ground, it locks itself in, and then we can straighten the drill back up. From there, we drill down as deep as the petrol auger will let us. But for these piles, that still is not deep enough. So we finish the holes with a hand auger. Because these piles are sitting on a slope, we want them locked deep into solid ground, not just holding near the surface. That is why each pile hole needs to be around 1.6 meters deep. As we drill down to this depth, we reach the water level, so these holes cannot stay open for long. That is why, before taking the holes to full depth, we already start preparing concrete. For this job, there is no point ordering a concrete truck. The piles do not need a huge amount of concrete, and working beside the pond means we are not trying to rush every hole at once. The main thing is to make sure every batch gets enough cement. And because this sand already has plenty of small aggregate mixed through it, we do not need to add any extra gravel for this mix. We fully load the tracked dumper with concrete before heading back to the piles. One full load should be enough for a few holes, so we are not stopping after every single one. And with deep ruts, mud, water, and soft ground everywhere, this little machine just crawls through it like a tank. With the concrete already beside the pile holes, we do not waste time. Each hole gets filled about halfway first, just enough to push the water out and keep the sides stable. Then the rebar cage goes in while the concrete is still wet. We do it at this stage before the hole is fully filled, because forcing cages into a full pile later can turn into a real fight. After the cage is in, we fill the pile almost to the top. We leave a bit of rebar sticking out because next we still need to set all the pile tops to the same height. We also set up a string line along the edge, so we have a clear guide for how the curve should run. And to set all the piles to the same height, we use the optical level. This gives us an accurate reference point, so every pile top can be finished at the same height. The more accurate we are here, the easier the next stages will be. Then we line up the anchor plate with the string line and set it into the top of the pile. We set it flush with the top of the concrete, so the plate becomes a clean fixing point for everything that needs to connect to the piles. Then we make sure the anchor plate sits level. That way when the steel edge goes on, it can sit flush across all the piles. And just when the last pile positions were nearly marked, the ground decided to give us one more problem. A big rock was sitting right where the pile needed to go. So before we could finish these last piles, that rock had to come out first. This rock was bigger than it looked. Good thing we had the loader nearby because this was not coming out by hand. With the stone out of the way, we can finally finish the last piles. For the last pile, the rock left a much bigger hole than we needed, so we use this metal air duct as a temporary form. It helps bring the pile up to the right height and keeps the top cleaner. Once it is filled with concrete, we pack sand around the outside so the concrete holds its shape when the duct comes off. And with the last anchor plate in place, the pile stage is finally finished. The foundation for this steel edge is now ready, so we can move on to the next stage. Before the steel edge can go on, we need to clean and level the ground between the piles. The ground needs to be level with the pile tops, or slightly lower. If it sits too high, the steel edge will not sit flat on the anchor plates. Even without the steel in place yet, the curve is already starting to show. And the last thing before the steel edge goes in is grinding down any concrete lumps on top of the piles. That way the steel edge has no excuses not to sit flat on these anchor plates. With everything set, we can start installing the steel edge. We are going to install it in 2 rows because one plate on its own does not give us the height we need. Before we weld the steel edge, the railing posts need to go in with it. Since all pile tops are set to the same height, every post can be cut to the same length. We also grind a small bevel on the bottom of each post, so it sits cleaner on the plate and gives us a better weld. Then we temporarily pin the steel edge in place with rebar. That locks it in position before we start welding. Then we line up the railing post with the steel edge and set it plumb. First we line the post up one way and tack weld it to hold that position. Then we check it the other way and tack weld it again. That way the post is already locked and plumb before the final welding starts. Once the first posts are plumb, we can fully weld them in place. Locking the posts in position first makes the steel edge much easier to control. The edge is already sitting on the anchor plates, following the curve. Now the posts help keep the steel edge plumb, so we can tack weld it and lock it into position. To join these 2 steel plates together, we run a vertical weld bead through the joint from both sides. That way the separate plates become one continuous steel edge. With the steel edge going in, the top line of the pond bank finally starts to show. At the end of this edge, we line it up with the existing retaining wall. We will connect it properly later, but first we need to get the whole edge set in place. And with this custom piece in place, the first row of the steel edge is finally tied together. Now we can start installing the second row. This row goes in much faster, using the first row as our guide. We stitch weld the layers together and stagger the joints so they do not line up in the same place. Then we set the channel drain in place between the steel plates. That way the gap is already there when the drain needs to go in later. With this row going in, we can finally see the line the finished landscape will follow. After a lot more welding behind the scenes, the main steel edge is now tied together. There are just 2 end pieces left to fit into place. With the end pieces fixed, we bring in the plastic grass grid and mark out the trench around the edge. It may look like a small detail now, but this base has to carry the mower later. So before the grid goes down, we need solid, compacted material underneath it. By digging down to the bottom of this steel edge, we create around 20 centimeters of depth for a solid, compacted base. And where the channel drain will go, we need to dig the trench even wider and deeper, so there is enough room for the concrete bed that will hold it in place. Then we bring in sharp sand for the bottom layer. It gives water a path to move through and helps spread the pressure more evenly under everything above it. So it works almost like a thin cushion layer. It does not need to be thick, just around 5 to 10 centimeters before the subbase material goes on top. Then we compact this layer with a homemade hand compactor. Once this layer is compacted, the channel drain goes in on a thick concrete bed. That locks it in place and lets us set the right angle for the water to run away. Then we pack concrete along both sides of the channel drain so it is fully locked in place. The concrete is hunched up around it, but kept about 5 centimeters below the top of the drain. At this stage, the tractor is making a proper mess of the existing landscape. Mud is everywhere, but sometimes you have to break it before you can make it. Now the subbase material starts going in. This is what will turn the ground beside the edge into a solid base. I also want to say I really appreciate everyone watching these builds. Your comments, likes, and support help keep this channel moving forward. So if you enjoy this kind of work, consider subscribing. There is much more on the way. With the base section finished, we need to add one small detail by the planter that leads into this edge. This end tile closes the corner against the edge and makes the finish look cleaner. We will cover the full tiling work in an upcoming part of this garden transformation. For the plastic grid, we use a very dry concrete mix. It only goes in as a thin bed, about 2 centimeters thick, just enough to help hold the grid in place. Because the mix is dry, water can still move through it more easily than it would through a wet concrete bed. The first grid piece has to follow the steel edge and fit neatly between the tiles, so we trim it at an angle until it sits cleanly in place. To fit it into place, we gently tap it down with a rubber mallet. The grid needs to sit flush with the steel edge, while sloping toward the edge at the same time. That way, any water coming down the hill can run off by the edge, instead of getting trapped behind the grid. And after heavy rain, the whole landscape turned into a proper mud bath. Not ideal for working, but perfect for testing the channel drain. We can get back to installing the grid. As the grid starts following the curve, every joint needs a bit of adjusting, so we use the metal angle to copy the line from the piece already in place. Then we can trim the next grid piece to match it. It is a small detail, but it makes the whole edge sit much cleaner. We could not get any more of the black grid, so this last section has to be finished in green. But to be fair, it does not matter too much. Once the grid is filled with soil and the grass grows through it, you probably will not notice the color difference anyway. But what would you have picked here, black or green? And with the last piece in place, the plastic grid is finally set. Now we can start reshaping the ground around the edge. We start with the cultivator, breaking up the old soil around the grid. At this point, the soil is still too wet to get a clean finish, so breaking it up now helps it dry out quicker and makes the ground easier to shape later. While the loosened soil dries out, we start filling the grid with topsoil. It is not perfect, but it gives the grass a better layer to root into. And remember that big rock we dug out earlier? I found the perfect place for it. That made the transition a lot smoother. Rate this save from 1 to 10 in the comments. We leave the soil slightly proud of the grid for now. Once it gets rain and settles in, the level will drop a bit. Now the soil is dry enough to work with, we can start shaping the ground properly. The high spots come down first, then that soil gets moved into the low areas. We also borrow a bit more soil from the next project area. That way we can save the topsoil for the final layer. With everything roughly leveled out, we run the cultivator over the whole area one more time. This breaks up the last lumps and gives the topsoil a smoother base to sit on. Then the topsoil starts arriving. This area is going to take quite a few trailer loads, but there is no time to waste, so we start spreading the final layer for the grass. First, we spread the topsoil with the front bucket. Then we run the cultivator through it again to break up the lumps. But for the final finish, the tractor has to stop and needs to be done by hand. But seriously, we give it the final touches with a rake. The machine work gets the shape close, but the best finish still needs a bit of manual labor. And just like that, this edge is reinforced and much safer for the tractor mower. The top rail will go on later, once the grass has grown in. There is still a lot more coming, so consider subscribing if you do not want to miss the next part. And if you missed the retaining wall build, that video is on screen now.